Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tammy, Stackelhouse, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tammy Stackelhouse, and this is episode 140. Today is our newest Ask the Coach episode. Every 10 episodes, I answer a question sent in by you, the listeners. You can kind of think of this as the Fibro Dear Tammy version of Dear Abby. And today, I'm answering a question sent in by Natalie. She says, I am having trouble finding my team, as you call it. I often feel so alone in this. How can I best find a doctor to suit my needs? And that is a great question, Natalie. It's a question that we all face at some point, am I right? Whether it's because you move, your doctor moves, you end up with a new diagnosis and need different kind of help, or you're just no longer confident that your doctor is the best person to help you, we all will need to search for a new doctor at some point. So today, I've got some tips on how to find a good doctor, what to look for to make sure that they're going to suit your needs, and what to do once you find a doctor that you think you might want to see. Before we begin, though, I want to share a few reasons why you might need to find a new doctor. Now, as I start this, I want to start with a quote from one of my favorite characters, Roy Kent. Where are my Ted Lasso fans out there? And if you aren't a fan, if you don't know who I'm talking about, the quote will still make sense. In this scene, he is talking to another one of the characters, to Rebecca, about a guy that she's dating. But I think that this quote applies a little bit to doctors too. And since Roy's favorite word starts with the letter F, I'm going to give you an edited version of that quote. Roy says, he's fine. That's it. Nothing wrong with that. Most people are fine. It's not about him. It's about why the heck you think he deserves you. You deserve someone who makes you feel like you got struck by lightning. Don't you dare settle for fine. And I think that applies to your doctor as well. Maybe you don't need to have a doctor who makes you feel like you got struck by lightning, but don't you dare settle for fine. You should have a doctor that you are excited to see, a doctor that you feel confident in, a doctor that listens to you, understands you, respects you as a human being. And let's face it, as a woman, most of us with fibromyalgia are women. And if you're a guy and you're listening to this, you deserve to have a doctor who believes that a man can be diagnosed with fibromyalgia. So what are some of the reasons that you might need to look for a new provider, besides the fact that you deserve more than just fine, right? So I would definitely be looking for a new doctor if your doctor is dismissive of you, of your pain, of your symptoms. That kind of goes along with a doctor that doesn't believe you, a doctor that doesn't believe you when you say it hurts and how much it hurts, or doesn't believe you that you are experiencing real symptoms. In one of our Alumni Association coaching calls earlier this month, one of our members said that she had a doctor that was telling her daughter that all her symptoms were because she needed to lose weight. This is an example of not fine. This isn't even fine, much less struck by lightning, right? So this is a good reason to find a new doctor. This also applies to if they don't believe in fibromyalgia. Now, there may be certain doctors for certain things. I'll give you an example. My acupuncturist was telling me that in Chinese medicine, they don't believe that fibromyalgia is a thing. They definitely have ways to treat it, but they look at it as something else. Now, you could have a doctor that doesn't believe that fibromyalgia is a thing, but can still help you with the other things that are going on with you, right? You might have a sleep doctor, or you might have a chiropractor, or you might have an orthopedist, or the person helping you with your diabetes, or whatever it is. Best case scenario, of course, you do want somebody who believes in fibromyalgia, but there may be times and places where that is actually less important. Some of the reasons I've had to look for a new doctor is moving and having my doctors be too far away. Obviously, when I moved from Portland to Seattle, that's a 3.5-hour drive. I actually kept some of those doctors. I still drive back to Portland to see my sleep doctor because he's amazing. And I drive back to Portland to see my, what do I even call her? She's really my primary care. She's my main doctor, but she also manages my thyroid, my fibromyalgia, all kinds of everything. Dr. B, who has been on the podcast before. I still drive back to see her. But of course, I can't have my physical therapist, my chiropractor, my massage therapist. I can't be driving 3.5 hours one way to go get a massage, right? So I have had to find new providers up here. And when we built our new house a few years ago, we moved from one part of Seattle, we actually were in Bellevue, to another part of Seattle. We're now in Renton. And it moved me another 20 minutes, half an hour farther away from some of my providers. And I can't drive an hour to go get a massage or to go for a 15-minute chiropractor appointment. That's just not realistic to drive an hour there, an hour home in traffic. I kind of feel like it undoes all the good they do me. So sometimes we need to find new providers because we move or they move, and it's just too far for us to go. And at the same time, there may be providers that the drive is worth it. Another reason you might be looking for a new doctor is that you feel like the providers that you're seeing just don't have the skills or the knowledge that they really need to have in order to be able to help you. Now, this may include fibromyalgia, but I want to put a little asterisk on that and say that if your doctor is willing to learn, then this is much, much less of an issue. I would much rather have somebody who is willing to learn and doesn't know everything than somebody who thinks they know everything and isn't willing to learn. Because the science is still continually changing, right? As we learn more about fibromyalgia and as we learn more about everything else, we want people who are continually learning and growing. So if you feel like your doctor is either unwilling to learn, just doesn't have the skills, it's beyond what their area of expertise is, this often will happen if you get a new diagnosis and you need a new doctor to help you with that diagnosis. Another reason to look for a new doctor is when you are hearing from your provider that everything is fine, even when you know it's not fine. There is a certain amount of, this kind of goes back to that very first thing I mentioned about being dismissive of you or of your pain, of the symptoms that you're experiencing. So if you are continually being told that there's nothing wrong, when you know there is, that's a good sign that it's time to find somebody else. It's also a good time to find somebody else if they are talking down to you, right? Like at this point, especially listening to this podcast, you probably know a little bit about fibromyalgia, right? So if you have somebody that's talking down to you, acting as if you don't know anything, that's a good reason to find a new doctor. Or if they just don't explain things well. As patients, we want to be as informed as possible about our care. We want to partner with our doctors to create that care plan. And if your doctor is a one-man band and is kind of the because I said so answers, then that might be a good time to look for someone else. Now, I do also want to say that with fibromyalgia, you are going to need a team of people, which was actually part of Natalie's original question. She's having trouble finding her team. You're never going to find one doctor who's going to be able to do everything for you. Even Dr. B, who manages my thyroid, my fibromyalgia, like so many of my things, she's not an expert in asthma, so I have a doctor that helps me with my asthma. She's not an expert in sleep medicine, so I have my sleep doctor that helps with my upper airway resistance syndrome. And she's not a chiropractor. She's not a massage therapist, right? You need a team of people. So if you are looking for the doctor who is going to fix you, this is your reality check. That person doesn't exist. Even the amazing fibro doctors like Dr. Ginevra aren't also a chiropractor and a massage therapist and everything else, right? You will need a team. Along with that, you need providers that are willing to be part of a team. So if you have a doctor, a provider of any kind who wants to be the only person treating you or doesn't like taking input from other people on the team, that could be a sign that this is somebody that you might need to replace on your team. So those are just a few of the reasons that you might need to find a new provider. Obviously, there's loads of reasons, but some of those reasons I think we often don't really think of as reasons because we're like Rebecca in that story that I told at the beginning, right? We think fine is fine. Fine is not fine. You should never settle for fine. Okay, now you've realized you need a new doctor. Now what? And this is the big challenge for a lot of us. Trust me, I have gone through this many times where I've had to find somebody new, like I mentioned, just even recently moving. How to find a new doctor? I think the first way that we can start getting a good list of names is referrals. Now, this is something that as a coach, I help people with all the time. I have literally had people hire me to help them find a doctor because it is a process and there's so many options and there's, let's face it, a whole lot of not good doctors out there. There's a lot of good ones too, but it's sometimes hard to weed through the good and the bad and find what fits you the best. So I have had a lot of people who've hired me specifically for that reason to help them find a doctor. So that is one of your options. And with me and my coaches, we actually have a global network of coaches, of people that those coaches then work with, that their clients work with, so we can often find someone specific for you. We also, of course, many times need to find someone who works with our insurance. So when I am helping clients find a new doctor, the first thing I have them do is go out to their insurance, whether that's to the website or giving them a call, and get a list of the kind of provider they're looking for. Let's say that they're having migraines and we need to find a neurologist to help with those migraines. Go to your insurance, get a list of neurologists near you. And I'll be honest, I literally did this in the last year. I needed a new neurologist because my neurologist was moving even farther away from me, and it was going to be an hour and a half to go see him one way. I'm like, yeah, nope, not going to happen. So I went to my insurance, sort that list by distance. How far the clinic is from you. You might as well start with the close ones, right? Not the ones that are far away. So take that list from insurance, sort it by how far they are, and then start researching each individual one. With that list from insurance, you can also do a few other things. One of the things you can do with that list is go to your providers, your current providers, particularly the ones that you like and trust, and ask them if they have suggestions. I had done this with my physical therapist, knowing that She probably has clients that are dealing with migraines as well, who probably get Botox injections. And so where do they go? And one of the people that she recommended was on my list. Ask around, ask the other providers that you know, particularly the ones that you like and that you trust, and see what kind of recommendations that they have. You can also ask the flip side of that, of who have you heard bad things about? Where do I not want to go? Who should I just cross off my list right now? So you can ask that question too. You can also ask your friends. This can be a little bit tricky. Make sure that you are asking a friend that needs what you need. So for instance, if you're looking for someone to help you with your fibromyalgia, you're not going to ask somebody for a referral who does not have fibromyalgia because they don't have the same needs that you do. But if you are looking for a sleep doctor, you can ask your friend that uses a CPAP machine. Where do you go? Do you like them? So asking friends for referrals is a great option. As someone with fibromyalgia, I will tell you, and you've probably heard it on this podcast before, you really need to have either a naturopath or a doctor trained in functional medicine on your team. They just look at medicine differently. They are much more equipped to help with chronic conditions, particularly with things like hormones, all of that kind of stuff. They just look at the numbers differently. So finding a naturopath, finding a functional medicine doctor, and adding someone like that to your team can be hugely beneficial. In some places, these people can even act as your primary care. My doctor, Dr. B, she is a naturopath. And she serves as my primary care doctor, but she also looks at things through that lens. And in one of the episodes that I interviewed her on, one of the ways that she described functional medicine was basically naturopathy, but for MDs. So they kind of are the same thing, just naturopaths. They are NDs, naturopathic doctors. And functional medicine doctors tend to be MDs, regular medical doctors. If you are looking for a doctor who is trained in functional medicine, this could be an MD, but it could also even be chiropractor, naturopath, registered dietitian. It could be lots of other people as well. You can find those providers on the website for the Institute for Functional Medicine. It's just ifm.org. You can just go there. They've got a physician locator, and you can just type in your zip code. Again, find a list, sort that list. One of our recent graduates at our Stories of Hope event talked about the fact that her coach, even though she's in Mexico, her coach is in New York, talked about the fact that her coach helped her find a functional medicine doctor, and they did it this way. If you are looking for a naturopath, I would recommend checking your state naturopathic association. For instance, in Oregon, it's OANP, the Oregon Association of Naturopathic Physicians. So you would search Naturopathic Association and your state. And again, most of them have a physician locator on their website, and you can get a list of providers near you. Also, don't underestimate things like Yelp or Google just for looking for, hey, neurologist near me, allergist near me, whatever it is that you're looking for. When you find those names, whether you find them on IFM's website or the Naturopathic Association or even just on Yelp, take that and cross-reference it with your insurance list. Because if you have insurance, we want to have that be covered as much as possible. If in the end you can't find somebody that insurance covers, this sometimes does happen, then sometimes it's worth paying out of pocket to see a good provider. But at least to start, we want to cross-reference those and make sure that it's somebody that is on your insurance. So now you've got a list, right? You've got a list from insurance. You've cross-referenced that with Yelp reviews, Google searches, the IFM physician locator. You can even look specific people up on the IFM locator. So you can go the other way too, right? Take your list from insurance, look those people up on some of these websites. You can go that route. Now that we've got that list, what do we do with the list, right? We need to do some research. We can't just call up the first person on the list and say, I'm your patient now. We need to check and see if they are going to suit my needs. So some of the things that I really recommend that people do, first off, get really clear about what you need. So in Natalie's case, when she asked the question about trying to find her team and trying to find a doctor to suit her needs, my first question as a coach is, what are those needs? So when I'm helping someone find a new provider, the first question I ask is, do you need this person to be a primary care, or is this someone that's like a specialist being added on to your team? What do we need this person to do? So in my case, when I was looking for a new neurologist, since we already talked about that, I'll keep using that as an example. I specifically needed someone who was going to be able to continue giving me those Botox injections once a quarter. So when I was looking for a new neurologist, that was one of the questions I asked. Do you do Botox injections? Because that is the main thing that I need. So whatever it is for you, if you need nerve blocks every so often, or injections, cortisone injections, or a certain style of chiropractic adjustment, or certain medications, whatever it is, if you are looking for something specific, get really clear about that. I would recommend taking some time and actually writing these things down. I would also write down the soft skills, so to speak, that you might want to make sure that somebody has as well, right? Being a team player, believing you, being a good listener, explaining things simply and clearly. Your needs might be different than the next person's needs depending on your situation, right? If you're a nurse, you probably need somebody to explain things maybe not as simply as someone who's not a nurse, right? Like you could handle more of the technical information and probably want it. So looking at what you need and really making that list so you know what you're looking for. The next thing I do is I pull up their websites. I read as much as I can about them. I try to find reviews about those providers. Things that I look for in those reviews, some of the specific words I look for, especially if it's any kind of body work, so physical therapy, chiropractic, massage, those kinds of things. I definitely look for the word gentle. I sometimes look for that even if we're talking about a counselor or a primary care, right? Just that more gentle approach. A lot of us with fibromyalgia really kind of need that. So that's a word I look for. I look for reviews and comments that help me know if this is a person that really listens to what you have to say. I look for comments about explaining things clearly. And I look for comments that help me know that this is a provider that likes to partner with their patients. I don't want somebody to dictate to me what to do. I want somebody who will come alongside me, say, here's what's going on. Here's what our options are. What do you want to do? I want somebody who will partner with me to help me meet my needs so I can live the life I want to live. So I look for that word. You might also look for the word fibromyalgia, and this may be a good or a bad clue. Let me see if I can explain this. Some of this, after being a coach now for 15 years, living in the fibro world, almost 20 years, I have a little bit of a sixth sense about some of these things, a lot of intuition, and I can read between the lines. Some of this is hard to really put into words, but if someone just has the word fibromyalgia on a list of conditions that they treat, I often see this on chiropractors' pages or massage therapists' pages, where they list a bunch of things that they treat, and fibromyalgia is one of them. If they just list it, but they don't say anything else anywhere else, that doesn't really mean anything to me, because I can just say a word, right? I can just list chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and lupus. And I mean, I can make a list of conditions and not really know much about them, right? So that isn't necessarily a good clue. But if they say more about it, sometimes that can be a good thing. Sometimes they say more about it and it can be a bad thing. You just want to make sure that their philosophy matches up with yours for fibromyalgia. A lot of people, like I was mentioning about my acupuncturist, fibromyalgia isn't really a thing that they, quote, believe in, and they think that people with fibromyalgia are misdiagnosed and it's something else. This is not true. That's like saying you don't believe in diabetes. There really is a condition called fibromyalgia with scientific proof to back it up. It's not Santa Claus. So we really want to make sure that we're getting the right people. Again, I'm looking on their websites, reading their bios. I'm looking for things that help me know that this is someone that wants to partner with their patients. I might look for functional medicine, as mentioned on there. I'm going to look for their availability, right? If their first appointment is 4 months from now, what's that going to be like to try to get into them if I really need them? So that can be difficult. If it's important to you, I would also look for doctors that have virtual appointments. With fibromyalgia, sometimes the day we need to go is the day we can't go. And so having virtual appointments can really make a difference there. So I would look for that as well. I would also read the reviews about their staff. You can have a really great doctor and a front office staff that just ruins the entire experience. I have had so many students, graduates, clients who are trying to get through to their doctors. They have a fabulous doctor, but messages don't get through, or the front staff drops the ball, or the receptionist is rude. So definitely pay attention to those things as well. And again, remember, what are your needs? When I was looking for a new chiropractor, when I moved to our new house, one of the things that I did was I contacted probably about half a dozen different offices, but I contacted all of them by email. Because I am a coach, I teach classes, I'm with clients, I am either on the phone or on Zoom pretty much all day. It is not possible for me to make calls or really receive calls unless it's something that's scheduled as an appointment, right? So for me to call and make an appointment or to answer the phone when they're calling me back is really difficult. And so one of my needs was I needed an office that I could communicate with electronically. So I emailed all of them. Probably about half of them I didn't ever hear back from at all, like just never replied to me. A couple of them replied, but it took 3 or 4 days. There was one place that emailed me back immediately. Guess where I go today? So even little things like that can be part of your discernment process on if this is the right place for me to go. Of course, read those reviews too. A lot of those will tell you those kinds of things. So now you've narrowed it down. You found 1, maybe 2 people that you think could be good. Now what? And it's a lot just to get to this point, right? Like I said, I've had people hire me to help them find a doctor. And so in 3 months worth of work, we were doing all of that research, right? And we were narrowing things down and reading reviews and figuring out where to go and getting that appointment scheduled. So now that you are going to that first appointment, one of the main things I want you to do is take somebody with you, if at all possible. There's several reasons for that. One of them is just simple fibro fog, right? We have brain fog, we're in pain, we're tired, our brains just don't work like they should. So when you can take somebody with you, you've got a whole extra brain to give you their impressions, right? To remember things, to share proper information with the provider, and to help retain the information that the provider gives to you. So take somebody with you. On a whole other level, there is something that sometimes happens when we as women go to providers, particularly if it's a male provider. Sometimes that provider, I'll just use myself as an example. There have been places that I have gone where my male doctor will talk to my husband more than he will talk to me. I want to see that dynamic. I want to know because that's part of the test, right? So yes, having somebody else with you is also like a whole extra brain to help you remember stuff, but it's also a test to see who is this doctor really going to listen to, the patient or my husband who's sitting with me. Now, as you are in that appointment, I would have the person with you taking notes. That way you can interact with the provider. And I would do this for every appointment. In fact, I did do this. My husband went with me to my appointments and I went with him to his. And there are lots of times that has been super, super helpful. Now, one of the questions I would ask in that appointment, or potentially even call the clinic before you schedule an appointment and ask, is how do you approach treating someone with fibromyalgia or other chronic conditions? Don't say you have fibromyalgia. Don't say, do you treat fibromyalgia? Because again, anybody can say yes. You want to know, how do you approach treating someone with fibromyalgia or chronic conditions? That'll kind of give you an idea of their philosophy of treatment. Do they want you to exercise and change your diet? Is that the cure-all? It's not. But if you can ask that question at the beginning, then you know if that's the doctor you want to go to or not, right? Now, on the flip side, maybe all they do is prescribe meds. That's not really the answer either. So asking that question ahead of time can really be super helpful. I would also ask the question, what if I have questions between appointments? How do you handle that? I want to know, how can I ask a simple question, right? Some of this is fibro fog, right? Your doctor tells you, maybe prescribes a new medicine, tells you how to take it, sends you home, you pick it up at the pharmacy. By the time you get home and you're actually ready to take it, do you always remember what was said in the doctor's appointment? I can tell you more than once I've forgotten. How do you ask a quick question like that? Or if you're experiencing a new symptom and you're wondering, is this fibro? Do I need to come in? Do I not? You want to be able to ask a simple question. So do they have some kind of a client portal where you can log in and ask a question? Can you call and ask a quick question? Are you like me and not able to call and need to have the email option, right? Ask those questions. And as I mentioned earlier, if you are someone who is interested in virtual appointments, ask about that as well. Dr. B is in Portland. I do sometimes see her as a virtual appointment, so I don't have to drive 7 hours round trip. But anytime I can see her when I'm in Portland, I do that. But the virtual option is an important option for me. My sleep doctor does not have that option. And so I actually have to go to Portland to see him. And obviously that takes a lot more planning. Asking, how do you make appointments? Are virtual appointments or phone appointments, are they an option? What do you do if you have questions? All of these things can be great questions to ask. Now, at this point, you kind of also have to go with your gut and your own personal needs, right? So if you need somebody that is going to provide you with a certain type of a treatment, of course, you're going to ask questions about that, just like I did with my Botox. Ask those questions as well. And please don't discount your gut. This is where we go back to Roy Kent's quote, "Don't you dare settle for fine." So trust your instincts when you are calling the office and talking to the front staff. When you go to the office, heck, even the parking lot. There have been providers that I have chosen to go elsewhere because I could never find a place to park to see them. Parking was a nightmare. With fibro, I don't need parking to be a nightmare. So we definitely want to watch for that. Trust your instincts when you're sitting in the waiting room. How comfortable do you feel? How comfortable does the provider make you feel? How much do you even just like them as a person, as a human being? My dermatologist right now, she's a little farther than I kind of wish that she was. It's a little bit of a drive to get to her, but I love her. It's worth the extra drive to go see her. So trust that as well. Don't just dismiss your instincts and your personal preferences. Now, that is a lot of information. And of course, your individual specific situation could be a little bit different. But let me just kind of run down for you some of the providers that I think that you probably need on your team, and maybe some of the extras and what they might be helpful for. Everybody needs a primary care. The person who does your annual exam, who checks your lab work, where you go if you end up with a UTI or an ear infection, like just your basic generic doctor. You need a primary care. As somebody with fibromyalgia, you need somebody to treat your fibromyalgia. That could be your primary care. It doesn't have to be a fibro specialist, but you do need somebody who's going to manage that. A lot of us have issues with our hormones. Thyroid is a biggie. Adrenals is another big one. You need someone who can manage that for you. Now, again, that could be your primary care, or it may need to be a functional medicine doctor, a naturopath, possibly an endocrinologist, but I will say endocrinologists haven't been hugely helpful for this type of thing. You are going to want either a functional medicine doctor or a naturopath on your team. Just like I said earlier, they look at things a little bit differently, and you need that little bit of a different perspective. Now, if your primary care is a functional medicine or naturopathic physician, then that might be an all-in-one for you. But if not, you will need to have them on your team. Most of us are also going to need a sleep doctor. 45% of all fibromyalgia patients have sleep apnea. Half of you listening, at least, are going to need a sleep doctor. You will need that person on your team. That could be a neurologist, it could be an MD, but you need someone who specializes in sleep medicine. You probably also want some providers who do different kinds of body work, depending on what your body likes and what you need. This could be a chiropractor, a physical therapist, someone who does rolfing or massage therapy, myofascial release. There's a lot of options there, but all of us pretty much we're going to need some kind of physical body work. I believe you also need a coach on your team, because all of those people that I just mentioned, you're going to go into their office. You're going to see them maybe for a 15-minute appointment. If you are seeing a naturopath or a functional medicine doctor, it might be 45 minutes, half an hour. But then you go home. And how do you implement all of the things that they are telling you to do? That's where a coach really shines. I also believe that you need a coach on your team. All those people that I mentioned, your physical therapist, your neurologist, your primary care, you're going to go see them, you're going to have your appointment, and then you're going to go home. And then what do you do? That's where a coach can really shine in coming alongside you and helping you implement all of the things that your provider is asking you to do. The other thing that's nice about a certified fibromyalgia coach is that we all have fibromyalgia, and we really understand living with fibromyalgia. So we can give you tips and tricks from our own life. We understand you. And so we can come alongside you and give that support in a way that your other providers just can't do. You might also want things like maybe a dietitian or a nutritionist or a personal trainer or various other things depending on what your needs are. But those other ones that I mentioned, your primary care, someone to manage your hormones, someone to manage your fibromyalgia, a sleep doctor, some kind of body work, those are really the main things that you're going to need. And at a certain point, you might start to feel like one of our coaches, Dr. Robin Pfaff, has talked about the fact that now she's proud of how many different people she has on her team. She used to be embarrassed about it, and now she's proud of it. And I'm kind of like her with that. The bigger the team, the better. The more people there are to help me, really. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up and share with you our listener shout out for this week. This comes from Margot. She shared this on Instagram, and she was talking about working with her coach, Giselle. She said, I feel it's like swimming in the ocean and you can't see the progress you are making. A coach can be the lighthouse to make sure you know you are going in the right direction. Thanks so much for that, Margot. And I think that is a great analogy. And this is also how working with a coach can save you time, energy, money, because we really do know fibromyalgia. We can see more of the bigger picture, and we can help direct you to those providers that are really going to make the difference for you. I know several of our students have connected with providers because of their coaches. Like I said, I help clients with this all the time, and it can really make such a difference. But if you're going to do it on your own, hopefully the tips that I gave you today will be the things that you need to help start building your team and getting providers that make you feel like you were struck with lightning, as Roy Kent would say. He would have a few more words in there. But anyway, I will go ahead and wrap this up for today. Our next podcast, episode 141, is our next Stories of Hope. You're going to hear from Margot. You're going to hear from Ileana, who is the student in Mexico whose coach helped her find a doctor, even in a completely different country. She's in that. We also have Jeanette in Switzerland. So we will have that for you in our next episode. We'll see you back here next time. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tammy Stackelhouse. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.